Hi, I'm Lori Schultz, University of Arizona. I am the university co-chair for the Electronic Research Administration Committee, along with my colleague from the National Science Foundation, David Saunders, who is the federal co-chair of the committee. And we're glad to have you here today to talk about SciENcv as a joint presentation with the ERA Committee and the Research Administration Committee. Before I intro our agenda and our panel, I'd like to run a quick poll. I mean, we're obviously here today to talk about the upcoming deadline for use of the NSF approved formats for the BioSketch and current and pending support forms. So we want to run a quick poll and for your readiness. And we'll give that a couple of minutes. I really want someone to answer for the, what does CNPS stand for? Because then we'll know how ready you really are.
No, we actually don't want anyone to.
Yeah, as we get closer to 75%, I'm sort of seeing the breakdown I expected, which is kind of ready. Some people are ready. So I think, a lot of us are sort of in the space of figuring it out. And a global health crisis certainly doesn't help us get, in a lot of ways, it hurts our ability to have in-person interaction to explain these things. So if Mary, you would go ahead and move to the next slide. So I'd like to introduce our panel, and then we'll go ahead and get into the presentation. So first up will be Gene Feldman from the National Science Foundation with the policy overview and reminders about what's changing and where it is in the PAP guide and when that takes effect. Bart Trawick from the National Institutes of Health and the National Library of Medicine will come in with application status on SciENcv and updates there. And Amanda Haymaker from Purdue and I will come in and talk about where we are institutionally from two different institutional perspectives about how we're handling the transition and readiness for the October 5th deadline. What we're hoping to do is do Q&A at the end. So you can go ahead and put questions in the chat, but we'll monitor those for inclusion at the end. We should have plenty of time to handle your questions after the presenters have gone through theirs. So if you want to, Mary, please move to the next two slides. And I'll hand it over to Jean.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. I am Gene Feldman. I'm still Gene Feldman. I was Gene Feldman yesterday for the NSF update, where you heard a lot about current and pending support and the biographical sketch from a policy perspective. So I'm not going to do a total repeat of yesterday. We're going to try to look at it from a couple of different angles today. So next slide, please. So the reason you have to do this is because we tell you you have to do it in the NSF Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide. And as you all know, this is a document that the schedule changed quite a bit as a result of feedback that we got from the community regarding how we were going to address some of the comments that we received. And so while we typically post the document in October and it goes live in January, because we took the comment process so seriously, we opted to delay that. And we posted the document in January with an effective date of June 2020. Well, now all of you know that since that time, in the spring, we had a little bit of a thing called COVID-19 hit. And what that did was, cause angst in the community about the level of preparedness, that slide, those questions you just answered about whether folks were ready. And so in particular, Koger contacted us. We met, I sat down with Koger representatives along with Fleming Krim, NSF Chief Operating Officer. We listened to the concerns raised, and we talked to them about these formats and the level of preparedness. And it was at that time that we determined that we believed that the institutions had some legitimate concerns. And so we opted to, for the first time, we delayed a piece of the implementation of the PAP guide to October 5th. We always do things over a weekend, so the dates are sometimes odd. But we opted to do, and this was based on feedback, by the way, we got from the community as to whether they thought that was even an appropriate date for us to do that. So that the NSF fillable format and SciENcv, the two NSF approved formats, will go into effect for proposals submitted or due on or after October 5th, 2020. And we have partnered with our colleagues at the NIH to develop not only an updated version, we actually already had a biographical sketch format out there, but we worked with our colleagues to update that at NIH, as well as to develop something that wasn't there, which was a current and pending support format. And so it's been an excellent partnership, very much a collaborative relationship with NIH. And they've very much been a partner from us from the perspective that since April, when we put drafts out there, we wanted the feedback that you all were giving us. It's been absolutely essential to having us understand where the confusion was, where there were legitimate issues that needed to be addressed, where folks said, maybe if you did it a little differently. And that has been absolutely vital to us in terms of development of multiple sets of FAQs, help materials, as well as video tutorials. Next slide, please. So on the NSF website, we actually have a good bit of information that we've continued to build out and populate since we began posting these formats to the NSF website. There is a separate format for the a page rather, for the biographical sketch. And you have basically a one-stop shop for the biographical sketch in terms of having some resource material on there, some policy material on there that helps you understand, links to materials that would be helpful for you, such as FAQs, etc. And it is something that we're very pleased with the progress that we have been making in terms of developing resources and materials to help navigate you through this process. And so based on everything you've been giving us, that's how these pages have been built out based on the feedback, very much so, that we have gotten from the community. Next slide, please. So the biographical sketch and current and pending support FAQs. So again, lots of time, as I've mentioned, these are the ones every day we get comments, literally every day, on use of these formats. And NSF has policy at nsf.gov. That's where we identify at the bottom of this slide. And again, you have been communicating with us. And we thank you for that, because had you not been communicating, we would not know that we even needed to address some of these issues. So some of the recent FAQs that we have put out there have to do with the difference between what is included on the budget and how to report effort on current and pending support. I talked about that yesterday at the NSF update and indicated that that was one of the single biggest issues and confusion that folks were facing in understanding how to fill out these formats. And we made it very clear that there is definitely a huge difference between what you're putting on the budget and the amount of funding that you are going to be requesting from the National Science Foundation to what you put on current and pending support, which is what you as an individual, all senior personnel are filling this out. What is it, how much time will you be devoting to this particular project or proposal or in-kind contribution? So please, I can't reiterate it enough that you need to start thinking differently about those two parts of the NSF proposal. How to report in-kind contributions without an associated time commitment, meaning if we're trying to find out capacity, if there's no time commitment, that's not something that we actually need to know about. However, if there is no time commitment, but it is something that's going to be used on this particular project, an in-kind contribution, then you would put it not in current and pending support, but facilities, equipment, and other resources. Whether outside consulting activities must be reported on the current and pending support format. And we literally took probably the longest time to answer that question because it's very complicated in terms of how it would work. But we point you back to the definition of these professional service activities or consulting in 2 CFR 200. And we have a very, very, what we believe, helpful FAQ to help you now navigate the issue of whether or not consulting should be reported. Whether it's allowable to delete pages from the current and pending support form. And specifically, I'm talking about the NSF fillable format. Yes, we know there are extra pages. I'll tell you right up front, no, we don't want you at the present time. We are spending a lot of time, folks, on addressing this issue. So stay tuned on that. The types of professional appointments that should be included in the biographical sketch, because we understood there was some confusion. Everyone really had a pretty good idea of institutional and academic appointments, but this concept of a professional appointment was one where folks were a little confused, and we provided very specific guidance on that. That is on the biographical sketch page that I just showed to you. But we want to continue to address your issues. So please continue to submit any questions to policy@nsf.gov. We really want to make sure that you're ready as close as you can be for that October 5th date. Next slide. So now I'm turning it over to Bart to do his SciENcv overview.
Great. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you, Jean. Hello, everybody. I'm Bart Trawick from the National Institutes of Health. And Jean, you really set up my talk extremely well. I want to thank you for that. And there's two things that I'm going to be pushing in this presentation. And that is feedback. As Jean mentioned several times, we've only been able to improve this from the feedback we've been getting from the people using it. And I'm really appreciative of the feedback that we get, and I have some exciting things to show you today. And also the collaboration between the NIH and the NSF. So before I get into the exciting new updates that I'm going to share with you, I'm going to go just for a little bit of background about what SciENcv is. We started this project as an interagency effort about 7 years ago. And what we wanted to do was we realized that there's a burden for applying for federal grants from different agencies, and that we wanted to address this to make it a lot easier, a lot more streamlined, to make the process much less burdensome. And to do this, we've had several different goals in mind. One is to kind of remove the administrative burden that is part of this process. We also realize that investigators have a lot of information that are out there in systems already. And so we said, hey, how can we allow investigators to leverage that data to make these forms much easier for them to fill out? And at the same time, this helps out the agencies themselves because they're able to much better track the scientists throughout their careers. We have NIH-funded students that then go on and might work in industry and whatnot. And so it gives a much better and broader perspective of the return on investment of tax dollars that have supported scientists and as they go out throughout their careers, where they end up. So SciENcv currently will support both NIH biosketch types. There's a general biosketch as well as a fellowship biosketch. It supports the National Science Foundation biosketch. As Jean mentioned, we've added support for current and pending support document at NSF and also the Department of Education biosketch. You'll be able to leverage data from several different external repositories such as ORCID and FastLane. It works with PubMed and PMC and NIH's grant administration site, ERA Commons. So let's go into that and we'll see how we're making this better. Well, administrative burden, number one, we try to eliminate you having to go in within these two documents. You'll find details on how to properly set up a biosketch for either the National Science Foundation or for NIH. You'll see how many margins you can have and lines per inch and font sizes, etc. And SciENcv eliminates that requirement right off the bat because we maintain the documents and make sure that it adheres to what is required by each of these agencies when you go and apply for grants. The big advantage that SciENcv has is it lets you link to external accounts where you might already have some information that's handy to fill out your biosketch as part of the grant application process. I'm showing the three main examples right here. You can sign in if you have an NIH grant already. You can sign into ERA Commons. You can sign into NSF if you have an account set up with them. And the third example is ORCID, the free investigator ID system where people are able to maintain their profiles. So linking to these external accounts will really give you a big benefit. First of all, you can use your credentials that you already have established. So if you are already going into ERA Commons to maintain your NIH grant, you use that same sign-in to get into SciENcv. It makes the sign-in process easier and it allows you to leverage that data. Not only that, not only are you getting the data from these different systems into SciENcv itself, but you can have all three of these different external accounts linked to SciENcv at the same time. So you can link your ERA Commons, you can link your research.gov, you can link ORCID, you can pull information from all of these sources right into SciENcv. You can sign into your account from any of these that you have linked to SciENcv. So it's integrated with these different external systems and it allows you to pull that information in, use it to quickly set up your biosketch for your grant application. So how do you link it? Well, if you haven't linked it when you first sign in, as you fill out your biosketch, and on the left screen I'm showing I'm working in a biosketch, I'm working on an NSF biosketch. We'll have options throughout that biosketch form itself that says, hey, would you like to link your ORCID ID to it? Or do you have an NSF ID? You're filling out an NSF biosketch. Why don't you link it to your NSF ID to make things faster? So we do have little prompts throughout the biosketch itself where you can go in and sign in to these external systems. Within MySCBI, if you click on your username, when you're signed in, your username will appear in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. That'll take you to an accounts settings screen. And from this accounts settings screen, you can see all of the external accounts that you have linked to SciENcv. So in this case, I'm showing ERA Commons and ORCID. If you want to add additional accounts, you can click this change button. You can add in additional external accounts to your SciENcv or remove them if you want. And also, I'd like to point out just below that, there's a box for delegates. So if you have somebody that typically helps you fill out these biosketches and you want them to maintain the biosketch for you, you can go in there, you can add a delegate to manage this. The system will send out an email to that person. They'll come and sign into SciENcv, and then they'll be able to fill out their own biosketches, and they'll be able to help assist and maintain the ones that are in your profile as well. So you've set up SciENcv, you're ready to go. What happens next? How do I start using these citations? Well, a SciENcv account comes with a My Bibliography as default. So My Bibliography is where all your citations are stored. So you get that for free. It's integrated very tightly with PubMed. So NIH-funded investigators are probably very familiar with My Bibliography because they are required to use My Bibliography to track their peer-reviewed publications for compliance with the NIH public access policy. And when they're ready to fill out their annual progress report, that information is pulled from My Bibliography and it actually populates their RPPR. So NIH-funded investigators know My Bibliography. You get it as part of SciENcv. If you come into SciENcv and it's all empty, you want to get started really quickly, you can add things right from PubMed. So it's just integrated tightly with PubMed. If you have a citation manager that already has a lot of your citations in it, you can export an RIS file, which is a structured file that most of the major citation managers will export, and you can put that into your bibliography and we'll get you up and running very quickly. And finally, if you need to create some manual citations, you can do that right in My Bibliography as well. But SciENcv is also integrated with ORCID. And if you have an ORCID account and you've linked it to SciENcv, you can pull citations and grant information from the ORCID account as well. And ORCID gives you some extra options. It's really specialized in that it can pull from many different sources, not just PubMed. It can pull from Crossref and Scopus and European PMC. So it's really a much broader range of scientific materials you can easily get into ORCID. My Bibliography is connected to PubMed, and so that's the life sciences. But I like to point out that ORCID is really a great solution if you're publishing in journals that are not part of the life sciences. That ORCID is really a great tool. It's connected with many of these different databases and can pull it in as well. If you have a citation manager, just like you can upload into My Bibliography, you can do the same thing with ORCID, and ORCID also supports you creating manual citations. So you can use both of these. You're not limited to one or the other. You can use My Bibliography and you can pull in ORCID as well, and you can pull citations out of both of these citation managers. All right, so I was telling you that one of the big things I wanted to stress in this talk was feedback. And one of the major pieces of feedback we got was from the FTP meeting back in January that Jean and I were on. And one thing we heard loud and clear was a use case where what happens if I am publishing a paper and there's a lot of authors on that. The NSF BioSketch has a limitation of 2 pages to get everything in there. So I'm looking at the BioSketch form in SciENcv for NSF. I've pulled in a couple citations. There's actually 3 there. One has a few authors, and a couple of them, there's a lot of authors on those publications. And what would happen is, just pulling in those 2 citations, I'm already at 3 pages. I haven't filled out any kind of education information, no appointments, just those 2 citations that are important for me to show the granting committee my expertise in this, and I'm over the page limit. Now, SciENcv will alert you when you try to download this, hey, you've gone over the maximum. So this was a big problem that was brought to our attention at the FTP meeting in early winter. And we've spent time addressing this, working with NSF saying, this is something really important we have to address, and we want to fix it and get it right. So let me show you what we've built into SciENcv now. We're really excited about it. If you've linked your ORCID account, what this is showing here, I'm working in my NSF BioSketch. I'm adding some citations to it. There's the tab for my bibliography. There's a tab for ORCID. I've linked my ORCID account as well. And I'm showing those 3 citations that were on that previous screen. I show the first one that only has a few authors, and then a couple others, and there's a lot of authors there. Well, in this ORCID tab, you'll notice there's a new option, Edit Authors. It's right next to each of these citations. And I can go in, I can say, this author list is too big, and I want to update it. And if you click on Edit Authors, you'll get this pop-up window. All of the authors that are on that citation are populated right into there, and it's editable text box. So you can go in according to whatever guidance that you have for how you can structure the author list. And for this example, I've said I'm taking out all but the first 3 authors, and then I'm going to add an et al. I'm going to save that. All right. So now I'm looking in my ORCID tab. I've gone in, I've edited this second citation down, and SciENcv notes here, this has been edited. There's a third tab here called Edited, and that's where I can see all the ones that I've gone in, and I've changed the author list to fill in my BioSketch. Now you can see I have 3 authors, and I have the et al. I also, that second, the third citation that was there had a whole bunch as well. I had a few more authors. I had put on the et al. At the end. If I wanted to pick out my name from that author list to make sure that's included so they can see my name, you can do that with this. You can set it up and edit it how you need to have it.
Bart, can I jump in here for a second?
Yes, Jean.
Okay, so I am so happy that Bart so nicely teased this up, because it absolutely has been one of the biggest topics that we've had to wrestle with at NSF, not only from working with SciENcv to develop a technical solution, but we also had to address this from a policy perspective. And so when we were at the meeting in the spring where this issue was so strongly raised, this was something I had to go back and talk to my senior management about, because this was really, somewhat of a sea change, because the foundation was, no, you're putting all these names in here. All the names are important. And so from a policy perspective, we have clarified in writing that individuals, when they're doing these citations at their discretion, can list one or more of the authors and then et al. In lieu of completing the complete listing of author names. And so that is in writing, it is supported, and once we got that great go-ahead from senior management, we were able to work with our colleagues at NIH in developing this excellent, what we believe, excellent technical solution. So this was not only just a technical issue, but we had a policy piece that we had to address as well. Sorry, Bart, but I wanted to throw that in. Really great.
It's important to have that policy aspect in here when people don't know. Not getting in trouble. All right, so let's see. Now I'm looking in SciENcv. I've gone in. I've reduced the author list on those 2 big ones that was throwing me over the 3-page limit, and it all looks great. I can send it off, and it's going to go through without the page limits. So that's what we're really excited about. What I've shown you is screenshots from our development systems. It's, as of right now today, it's not live, but it's going through our final QA process where our outsiders come in and just make sure that we don't have any unintended bugs and whatnot. So we hope to have it available live for you very, very soon. But we're excited to show you what we have so far, and we hope it relieves a lot of anxiety about filling these out. So in SciENcv, I show an example here. This is a SciENcv page filling out an NIH biosketch and a SciENcv page filling out the NSF biosketch. And the forms look very similar. So if you're used to filling out one in SciENcv, I'm sure you'll be able to easily fill out the other and vice versa. And SciENcv, when you're ready to, you've got it all constructed the way you want, and there'll be a PDF button right there at the top, download as PDF, and we'll export the PDF on demand, formatted according to the specifications, so it's ready for submission through research.gov or grants.gov as part of your grant application process. The other thing that is super exciting, you might not be able to see this, I'm sure you're not able to see this, but we also put the structured data that made these biosketches along with the PDF, so that NSF is getting the nice paper form, and they're also getting the structured data that created that form, so they can put that into their systems and not have to do optical scan of your pages, but they're actually getting the data going right into their systems. And I'm showing you an example of the XML from that large author list. Remember we said, we let you go in, we let you, take out a bunch of authors so that your page limit would be met, but the XML, it has all those authors. So even though you've removed them from the print view, NSF is still getting the full author list. We put it packaged as the XML file that's attached to the PDF. So it's a really nice way for us to not penalize you for having collaborated with large groups doing important science from page limits in the biosketch, while at the same time getting that information that NSF wants to have over into their systems. So we really think it's a great solution that kind of benefits both of us. All right, current and pending support. We launched this in the spring. People have begun to use it. I show 4 different screens here. The first one on the far left, it shows you the interface when you're filling out the fields, how it looks like once you have it saved in SciENcv, and we produce the PDF on demand. If you print out that PDF and you look at it, and sometimes you never see the errors until you have it printed as a piece of paper. And they're like, oh, I have the wrong thing here. You just go right back into SciENcv, change the value you need to, hit the PDF button again, you get a brand new one with the data. And also, like the biosketch, we also package the structured data that created this document so that NSF is able to easily enter it into their systems. So SciENcv will let you create and store as many of these biosketches and current and pending support forms as you want. You can make PDFs on demand. You just click on that PDF button, it'll generate it for you. Make a change, click PDF again, you get a brand new PDF. You can have a delegate manage the account for you. And I saw in the chat, my eye kind of wandered over there. I saw a question, someone asked if you could have more than one delegate. And the answer to that is yes, you can have more than one person that can manage this for you. You send out as many email invites as you want to the different people. They'll be able to manage these for you. And as Jean mentioned, we've really spent a lot of time documenting this to make sure all the information is out there. On the upper left, I have the URL for SciENcv. You can also just Google it. We're the top hit. MyNCBI is the suite of tools that SciENcv lives in. We have full documentation on there. But on the right, I want to point out we have 3 really nice videos. The last 2 we released just within the last couple of months. There's an overview video. There is one that is specifically targeted for NSF users that are making their biographical sketches, and one for those that are filling out the current and pending support. Nice, quick, 4-minute videos, shows you all you need to know. Feedback, questions, extremely important to us. I included the email alias for the NCBI's help desk. Send us your feedback, let us know what's working for you, what's not, what can be improved. If you have questions specific to logging into your NSF's account, or policy questions, we have the email alias for those as well. And that is my last slide.
Thank you so much, Bart. We're going to move into some quick cases with the University of Arizona and Purdue, and I'm keeping an eye on the chat, and we will have plenty of time after Amanda and I are finished to answer questions. So feel free to keep putting them in there, but we'll handle questions at the end. And with that, I'll turn it over to Amanda Haymaker from Purdue.
Hi, everyone. I'll just talk a little bit about the experience here at Purdue, and to understand it, you have to understand a little bit about how we're structured. So we have a central office that has about 25 staff in it that directly support the faculty with their proposals. We are the sponsored programs office, and so the staff that are assisting the faculty are hands-on, and our reviews and approvals can happen very quickly. So as such, our faculty are very accustomed to that hands-on approach, both with their proposals and their current impendings, and also having quite a bit of time to finalize things right up until the deadline. So as far as the current impending impact to us with SciENcv, and I'm primarily focused on current impending when I'm talking about our structure here in this slide, we have in the past provided a system-generated report that addressed their current awards and pending proposals, had all the required data on it that NSF had asked for. And then they would revise that, tell us something had been not funded, adjust their effort where needed, those sorts of things. But our office would format it and finalize it for submission. Going forward now with the new forms and the option to use SciENcv, we just don't have the staff in the central office to input all of that data for every submission and every investigator. So we have asked the faculty to take that piece on as part of their proposal preparation. And that is a big change for us. We are attempting to answer their questions. They have a lot of the things that Jean has addressed and others. We're trying to answer those questions and help them navigate as best as we can. Some of them are disappointed that we can't continue to provide the level of service that we have in the past. We wish we could, but like all of you, we're facing budget cuts and whatnot. And even though we know we would need to add a person or two to do this, it's not in the cards right now. And then some of our investigators have jumped in and they're digging in and they're having some positive experiences. They're figuring it out, and it's not as bad as they thought it was going to be, I think. So, so we're hearing some good feedback as well. Definitely not all a struggle. So next slide.
Yeah, and so the University of Arizona is very different in a lot of ways than Purdue. Our research administration support, like the folks who are putting the proposals together, are a level removed from the team who is checking compliance with proposal and application submission. So our researchers have their own local proposal development support, which we call a departmental research administrator. And their current pending support forms and their biosketches are usually maintained locally. I put in PI's hard drive as a joke, but that's literally usually how it's happening. It's not coming from our systems. It's coming from them saving versions over and over again, which we know we want SciENcv to solve because we can have multiple versions for multiple application scenarios. Our departmental research administrators are using the fillable PDF the most right now. And we are an ORCID member. And so we've been working with our libraries to sort of integrate both SciENcv and ORCID training, because, you know, just like Purdue, the folks who are using SciENcv right now are reporting positive experiences, but one of the things they're having to do is also figure out ORCID and then figure out SciENcv. And once they've got that figured out, it works really well for them. So we've been working with the library to try to figure out how can we do both, to say you need to start here with ORCID, and this will make your life a little easier in doing these forms for both, you know, the NIH and the NSF application submissions. So next slide, please.
Okay, so in order to get ready for all of this, these are kind of the steps we've taken, at least from a central office standpoint, to get the faculty prepared. There's been a lot of communication. We've updated our website multiple times and tweaked it and revised and added more things. We sent an email or two through our associate deans for research to the faculty, and then also directly from the pre-award staff that are located centrally that help some highly active NSF submitting PIs. So trying to get that communication in their hands as early as possible. We updated language in all of our materials to make sure they understand it's their responsibility, that it is true, complete, and accurate, and reminding them that the data we're providing from our office is really just what's available in our system from an award and proposal standpoint, and that they need to review all of the requirements and provide all of the appropriate disclosures. And then we're doing some training inside our office to get our pre-award staff up to speed in order to answer questions and then anticipate potential issues at submission time. One of my biggest fears is a consultant that's named a key person that hasn't had this communication that we're doing here at Purdue sends us their bio sketch at 3:30 on deadline day in the old format. And we have to go back and figure this out. So we're trying to anticipate all of that and get the pre-award staff to remind the faculty and reach out to those other partners that maybe we don't have as much direct access to. We're really just putting a lot of emphasis on that communication. Next slide.
Yeah, and for us, it really is the same thing, is, re-envisioning training opportunities in light of the pandemic. And, if I've learned anything from the pandemic, is that there's no such thing as too much communication. It needs to come from different channels. It needs to be in multiple ways of viewing it, whether that's a website or an email or a regular webinar or office hours that's about it, really any topic. There's multiple channels of communication is really important. And one of the things that we had to do, especially in light of foreign influence and the change in the PAP guide, is really take a look at our policies that intersect with these definitions, like our conflict of interest and conflict of commitment policies, to make sure we were aligned. And while the policies were aligned, a tweak of the language so that people understood that we were talking about the same thing as the NSF was talking about or the NIH was talking about when we talk about your consultancy or other activities a researcher may be involved in. We wanted to make sure that everything aligned, so we were really talking about the same scenarios and the same conditions. Really, the hardest part for us about all of this has not been SciENcv, it has been COVID-19. We had some plans with our libraries because we have lots of faculty events where they're in-person events, and we had plans for things like ORCID tables to get people set up on the spot with a student, helping them get their ORCID profile set up so that we could then say, okay, now you know how to do this. This is what it looks like in SciENcv. And so that was put on hold for obvious reasons. And we're working on how we can have that same kind of experience remotely. Because I think that, now that our shift to remote work is evening out and people have adjusted to what life is like working from home, we're trying to figure out a way to create the same kind of opportunity to get faculty engaged in the moment to set up ORCID so that we can then have the conversations about SciENcv. And so next slide, please.
So this is just kind of some of the common questions and concerns surrounding either SciENcv or the fillable PDF forms that we're getting. The BioSketch, really the biggest, for us, the biggest source of confusion has just been about how to get their publications in. And while the material's there, they're not always seeing it. So just trying to educate and get the faculty and the investigators to understand the flow of information, and that they need to maybe go into ORCID to get those other publications that they're not seeing in my bibliography, those sorts of things. And then overall, right now we're seeing that most of our investigators are opting to use the fillable PDF, even though we're pushing them and encouraging them to use SciENcv. There are some concerns in our office amongst the pre-award staff about last minute changes to the title, or if the budget were to change that would impact the total amount of the budget, that then maybe we would have some current pendings that don't match, especially with that total project amount, if something were to change at the last second. And so we're talking about ways to prevent that and communication, and possibly suggesting just, we don't really need to make that change at this hour. So those are the biggest things from a technical standpoint, I guess you would say, for what we're hearing from the faculty. Next slide.
Yeah, and for us, while we're still using the fillable PDF the most at this point, there's only really been one issue that's popped up about the line limits on the other significant projects section, which I know our colleges have filed a ticket to talk about. But the unintended consequence of that is that we were able to get people to use SciENcv instead. So it's like that may have been something that was unintended, but we were able to drive some users to trying out SciENcv for the first time. So that worked out in a way that was unexpected, but still worked out. And for us, increasing usage of SciENcv is really about ORCID more than it is anything else. Ensuring that we have more ORCID users, that they understand how it works. And since we are ORCID members, and for those of you out there who are ORCID members, I would encourage you to think about this as well, because it's something that can make your faculty's life easier if you're using that ORCID API to get institutional information back into ORCID. And that's just one more integration set that will pull in information to populate their current pending support forms and biosketches from one place instead of having to go in and enter it all over and over and over again. And for us, that's really the biggest piece, is increasing our ORCID profile, because aside from SciENcv, that helps us in a number of different ways from the institutional level and the kind of data we want to see about our researchers. Next slide, please.
So this is just the really basic, lessons learned so far, but they're really the most obvious and overlooked all at the same time. Just, you have to read the FAQs. There are so many out there, and they are helpful. From both the standpoint of the technical use, I was struggling with figuring out how to get the delegation set up, and then all I did was pull up the FAQ and figured out what my issue was. It was the same when we were trying to figure out how to get all the publications in for one of the faculty, and realized that they were just looking at their My Bibliography entries, and they weren't going into ORCID to pull together everything that they needed. And the videos provide the same level of help. So making sure you spend the time to look at those. If you're struggling with something, it might save you a half an hour of frustration if you watch a 2-minute video. Next slide.
And it's really the same for us. I mean, I've said this over and over again, reprioritizing ORCID usage, getting people there, because it solves more than one issue for the University of Arizona to use ORCID in a more enterprise way on our campus. SciENcv is certainly one of those ways to make sure that they're able to make use of it without having to re-enter data over and over again. And we're working on how we can schedule remote events that would have been as meaningful as being able to talk to somebody and talk through an issue in person, which is one of the hardest things about the adjustment during the pandemic. And again, like I mentioned before, communication is the most important bit, and we have to come up with different ways to communicate. I know that on my campus, I've been here for a really long time. They see emails from me, and I think they might not look at them all the time. Maybe. They see my name and like, what is Lori saying again? So it's figuring out how to reach them where they are, and that isn't always this lengthy email from a listserv that they're going to be paying attention to. So we're figuring out how we can do that in concert with our libraries, because they're the ones who can answer a lot of questions about the way that publications show up in the various systems that they show up in, both on our campus and outside, whether that's PubMed or Scopus or some other thing that they're pulling their publications from. And I think with that, we are ready for your questions. So what I'll do is start going through the questions in the chat, and I will ask the first one of Bart, and that is, will the NIH follow suit and require other support being done through SciENcv? And if so, when?
Oh, you need to ask that of our policy shop. But I will tell you this. I'll tell you this. I have a meeting with them next month, so it's already kicking around in their head, and I think they might eventually go that way, but that's not official word. So
great. Thanks, Bart.
And we hope we have some more exciting news in the future to tell you about other agencies as well. So that's a teaser that this is good stuff, folks, and we hope that we can collaborate with other agencies on what we've learned here.
And so, Jean, we have a question about, is the intention that the fillable format only be used if the PI can't get their SciENcv PDF, or do they have a choice? Like, is there ever going to be a point at which you say, if it's not SciENcv, it's no good?
Okay, well, you asked two different questions because the first one is that, do you have a choice? The answer is absolutely. Right now, there is no, obviously, we can tell you that there, after working so closely with NIH, that there are some pretty exciting things that you could do with SciENcv that are not offered by the fillable formats. But the bottom line is that right now, there is no policy preference. You can use either to submit your proposal to NSF. Will that stay that way forever? Don't know. Too soon to tell the answer to that. Obviously, we continue to have a lot of discussions internally at NSF about, as each new issue comes up, what's the best way to deal with it. So stay tuned as to whether that changes.
One advantage right off the bat is if you went into the SciENcv and you set up a current and pending support and you got it all set for 2020 and you submitted it, now 2022 rolls around, you got to do it again. You can say, I want you to duplicate this one, and then now I've made a copy, I go in, I make the changes, I've got it, I'm ready to submit it for 2021. And if theoretically NIH ever wanted to go this same kind of route for their grants reporting, then like the BioSketch, you can say, make a copy of my NIH, but put it into NSF format, and everything that maps, we put it into there. There's still some things you need to fill out, but we try to make it interoperable. So if NIH goes that same way, and you've already been filling out these NSF current and pending support forms, we're going to try to make that information flow over to what NIH wants as well.
And we also get the XML data with a SciENcv submission. So, good stuff.
And speaking of XML, is there a way to import XML to create these forms?
That is a fantastic idea, and it's already been rattling around in the back of my head. So this is one of those things where feedback would really be helpful. Amanda, if you were saying that your office was used to generating these forms already, it might be possible that we say, if you can generate XML with this specification here, it's possible that we might be able to engineer something where we just take the information right from a program office and put it into the form and send it to NSF. So that's where having this dialogue with all of you here is really helpful for us to iterate and make changes to make everybody's life easier.
And obviously, administrative burden, that's the line that everyone is throwing around, and it's not just a catchphrase at NSF. Is absolutely important, and we do consider that in everything that we do. So hopefully, we can continue. Our hope is to continue to enhance these forms. That this is not just the last version you're going to see, that we continue to take the input from the community to make them the best that we can.
I'm going to pivot to a definition question for Jean. So the fillable PDF contemplates a category called submission planned, but it isn't elsewhere explained in the NSF documentation. So what does that mean?
It means you got a proposal, it's done, you're ready to submit it, but you haven't submitted it yet. So when many years ago, when that was added, the concept was, you have a faculty member, no, he hasn't submitted it yet, or she hasn't submitted it yet, or whatever term you use to describe that. But the bottom line is they know they have it ready, and it would be inappropriate for them not to, when they know they're going to submit it the next day, not to include that in their proposal to NSF. So it's the idea that, you're really planning to submit this to NSF or whatever place, and you're including that in your submission.
And so for Bart, if we've got a new investigator who is setting up SciENcv for the first time, do they need to set up a MyNCBI account as well?
Right, so let me, maybe there's a little confusion about that. So MyNCBI is the suite of tools, and there's many different tools that are within MyNCBI. SciENcv is one of them, and the bibliography is one of them as well. So when you come for the first time, let's say you follow a link to SciENcv, it'll ask you to sign in. I recommend you, if you've never signed in before ever, choose one of those sign-in options that you already have an account for. So if you have that NSF account, say, I want to sign in with NSF, and the system will say, hey, we don't recognize this NSF. You've never signed in with NSF before. Do you already have an account, or do you want to set up a new one? You say, nope, I'm brand new. Give me a new account. And then you have it all. You're in, you have your SciENcv there, you have the bibliography, and you can start working with everything. So it's just one sign in, tell us that you're new, you get all the tools.
So another question, if something gets pulled incorrectly, so like a book is called a presentation, how can that be fixed?
We really like to have you report those to us, because we can then go in behind the scenes. You know, when data is coming from ORCID over to us, we can see exactly what's going on. So if there's something where we didn't understand it, we can find out what that problem is and fix it right away, or offer you another solution if appropriate. So that's where we're here to help. And if you have an issue, let us know. The sooner the better, because that means we can jump on it and get it fixed quicker for everybody else.
Great, thank you. So I have one last question in the chat, and if I've missed your question, please either raise your hand or add it back to the chat, so because we've got a lot more time for questions. And this one is, can you import project data from Commons or research.gov into the current and pending support? So, you know, the title, start and end dates, PI name, all of that information.
So this is part of that continually improving thing. When we first launched SciENcv and we had the bio sketches built, you can't automatically import your ERA Commons grant data into the NIH BioSketch, because that's currently part of that NIH BioSketch. We know that people love that time saver. We want to make that available for current and pending support. So this is something that we're going to be working in future versions to add that feature as well. If you already have the information, it'd be great just to pull it in and tell us what items you want to include, and then pre-populate as much as we can. So it's not there yet, but it's on our list.
Great, thank you. I think, you know, while we wait for a few more questions, and people, we don't have any left, so keep adding questions if you've got them. One of the things that I would ask is, I know that, you know, SciENcv came out of an effort of the FDP in the early days. So what can we do to help you? I think I already know the answer.
Use it, let us know what you like, let us know what are some ways that we can make it better. You know, just having this conversation about how offices typically support their investigators. And, you know, it gets us thinking, how can we make a change there? I'll tell you an update that we did that came back directly from a PI that was using this. You know, it wasn't in my presentation, but we had an investigator that was filling out their positions, and they had a concurrent appointment with 2 different departments. And so I think SciENcv picked one or the other randomly to go to the top, and they said, no, I want this appointment to be my primary one and this one to be a secondary one. So by them contacting us and letting us know about that, it was like, oh, you know what, that's absolutely a legitimate concern. I'm sure some people, you know, it's not just one person that has that situation. They might have, you know, appointments at different departments. They want one to be listed before the other. That's an update that we were able to go in, fix that in SciENcv, came back with happy users that are able to accurately describe what their current appointment is. So feedback's essential for us.
Yeah, so we have someone thanking NSF for taking a step toward elimination of forms. I think we all envision a future where federal agencies are just getting the data from SciENcv. You know, in the ERA committee, we always say forms are a construct. The data is what matters the most. And I think SciENcv is a giant leap towards acknowledging that. So we've seen how you can create these formats without having to really figure out that Word document on your desktop the way you had to in the early days. So there's another question for the BioSketch. So they say, rather than entering the BioSketch in 2 different formats, is it possible to enhance later to enter the data once, then generate the different formats? And I think the answer, Bart, was what you just said about the NSF versus the NIH format.
Right. So I know there's a synergistic activities section in NSF, which NIH doesn't have. NIH, instead of products, they didn't want a listing of citations. They have a section there, which is contributions to science, which is kind of citations intermingled with some prose. So, there are some differences that they're not lockstep, and we're not able to do a seamless. I think it would be great. In fact, when we started SciENcv, that was the original goal. The request was, why can't you guys just have a single biosketch format that all the agencies need different information when they're making these decisions on how to send out awards. So that wasn't possible, but SciENcv is trying to bridge that gap as much as we can. And that was what we did when we first set it up, was we got biosketches from NSF and NIH. We looked at all the information that was the same. We could map that easily, but there are differences that it's not a one-to-one relationship.
I will say, though, that we have met, NSF and NIH have sat down, looked at not only the data elements that comprise the biosketch, but also the current and pending support. So we are working these issues to see how we might get closer. Will it ever be exactly the same? I don't know. I'm not a betting woman, but it's going to take a little while to get there, because again, they don't want synergistic activities, and they have a personal statement in their biosketch that we're like, nah, that's not what we want. So, but to sit down and talk, that's an absolute vital first step, and we are doing that.
So I have a question for Jean, and that's, does the NSF require updated current and pending support documents if we discover undisclosed items after proposal submission, but before an award is received? And if so, how do we send the updates?
Okay, so that's a little bit challenging to answer, but let me walk you through that. Because NSF's policy is that you do not have to provide an update automatically prior, if there is an update prior to award. But we do have many, in fact, as many of you will tell me, we have program officers that already right now do go through and ask for updated current and pending support prior to making an award. So you would, if the program officer asks you, you would provide it. We have, however, just added a new term and condition that goes into effect October 5th, that for new awards and funding amendments on existing awards, that does identify a process where if you identify that something was not identified, then you provide it to NSF. So it's kind of we're moving in those directions, but right now, the answer is you provide it if requested by the program officer to give an updated current and pending support.
Great, thank you. So I have a broader question about how has there been work with commercial vendors who provide system-to-system submissions on meeting the XML requirements for the biosketch and current pending support forms?
Not as of yet, but as I mentioned, we're interested in exploring that, yes. And we know that there are vendors that supply this information. And if we can set something up to sort of make that a seamless transfer, I think it would be a huge win for the investigators as well as the agencies.
And I would add one of my favorite ways of looking at this is you're their customer, tell them you want it. Because I think that's also one way of getting it done is them understanding that it's important for their customers to have that functionality to be able to do that. So we have a question about the year definition issue in SciENcv for current pending. So I'll read through this. It says, they've previously defined a year as an academic year, which is mid-August to mid-August. And the FAQs give an example of a fiscal year that spans multiple calendar years. And the instructions are to use the later year in that case. They wonder about a scenario where they have a project that runs, for example, August 1st, 2020 to July 31st, 2021 with 2 summer months committed. In that situation, some of the time, half of the month will be in the first calendar year, and then another part of the time would be in the following calendar year. So in that scenario, would it be acceptable to enter that time into 2 years in SciENcv to accurately reflect that one of those summer months happens in 2020 and the other summer months happen in 2021?
The bottom line that we're looking for in all this, and I mean, we tell you, we know we have some with multiple years out there. We tell you to report on the later year of if it's a 2 years. That's in the FAQs. I would simply say that no one is going to turn away that submission that does them and splits them. Nobody's going to turn that away because that actually provides clarity to what the senior personnel is actually doing. But the bottom line is the current FAQs tell you you can do it as one submission. So that's, I mean, that's fine. Either way, I think will work, but we do give you a solution in those cases.
Great, thank you. And so another question about NIH having a timeline for enforcing SciENcv for all grant mechanisms.
That's interesting, isn't it? That NSF requires SciENcv, but NIH doesn't yet. I don't know of a timeline, but it's possible.
Great, thank you. So I don't have any more questions queued up. So we'll give it a couple of minutes and see if folks have more questions. My VPR always counts down from 10 at the end of a meeting. And if you don't get it in by then we're done.
You're done.
Well, I really appreciate having the opportunity to come and talk, especially because, you know, last time when we presented and, you know, we were discussing this large author list and I mean, my alarm level went to 11 and we got to work on it right away. And Jean can tell you, the first solutions we didn't go with. We worked and said, what if we do this or what if we do that? And we really came to something I think is going to be really good. So I'm excited I got to come and say, hey, we have something that we've developed based on your feedback, and we hope it's going to be a really good solution for you. So,
and this is also an opportunity for us to continue to remind you, as we have throughout this presentation, is the changes that we made are based on the feedback that you've given. So keep giving it, because that's what's helping us improve. And obviously, as you could see and Bart just mentioned, we were able to address a pretty significant issue based on the feedback that you gave us. So thank you for that.
Looks like we've got one last question on in-kind support on current and pending. The PIs have not been able to enter 0, so they advise them to enter 0.01. So is that something that'll be fixed?
Okay, it's not a fix, folks. Okay, let's talk about what we want the information for. We want to do about capacity. Is the PI really not spending any time on that project? If they're not, that's the answer. And it means that we don't want it. Now, again, as I mentioned in my intro, if indeed that is something or an in-kind contribution that will be used on the project that's proposed, you would still, even if you claim the answer is 0, and I'm still questioning whether it's really 0, you would put that in facilities, equipment, and other resources. But we're trying to get to a person's capacity. So if there is no time, there is no impact on capacity. So that's the answer.
Great, thank you. And so we have a question that said, yesterday, Jean, you mentioned that if PI has a visiting postdoc funded by their government, it is not considered in kind. Their assumption would be that if it's benefiting the grant, it would be in kind.
Well, here's the deal. What we're talking about is the way it was actually, the question was asked is, I've got this visiting scientist, they're coming in my lab. The question is it current and pending support? If indeed that person was just placed in their lab, they got no project, no proposal, no in-kind contribution, what are they reporting? It wasn't given to them. Particularly with current and pending support, it's stuff you as an individual are getting. So I am going to respond back to that question, but you really have to tease it apart as to whether that individual as a visiting scientist has an affiliation with your institution and has been placed in that lab. I would have to know those details to be able to really correctly answer that question. But if the individual just had somebody placed in their lab, that's not a project proposal or an in-kind contribution. Really, that's theirs that they could take credit for. So we are going to put out another question on that to address it specifically.
Great, thank you. So there's another question on the fillable PDF of the BioSketch. Is it allowable to change the field sizes? Because some of the defaults are small.
We're asking you, yeah, we're asking you not to change any of the formatting on those templates. That's like the extra pages. I know that drives people crazy. We are talking about it significantly at NSF. We're not just blowing that off or spending a lot of time. We know about it, thank you. We understand your concerns, but right now we're telling you, don't change the format and don't get rid of those extra pages.
Thank you. I want to thank Jean and Bart who've been bridged to the FTP for a long while now in SciENcv and other things. And I look forward to us being able to present again at the next meeting. And thank you to Amanda. I mean, our schools are very different, but we're really trying to do the same thing, which is get our faculty on board and make it as possible for them. So thank you all. As chair of the ERA committee, and I'll speak for David as well, please let us know your questions and feedback about this, about how the ERA committee can help, because we want to be able to make this tool easy for all of us to use. So sending your feedback to the NSF and NIH is important, and we can help coordinate when we are seeing common issues. So thank you all very much, and I will turn it over to Mary to close out the session, and enjoy the rest of the meeting.